Welcome back, horror family. This is the first chapter of a story I wrote called Ivory Blood. The hunter steadied his gun, boots sinking deeper in the muddy ground with wet grime climbing up to his laces. Normally the forest would be teeming with loud calls and the chatter of local wildlife, but instead was filled with the dreadful echo of silence. He felt the odd atmosphere and understood not a predator alive could provoke the intense stillness around him, at least not one that he ever saw. Heel to toe, he carefully stepped through the rainforest with his raised elephant gun in hand, pushing aside branches and giant leaves with soft ease and ghost-like movement. Water dripped onto his leather jacket and hat from the upper echelons of the forest balcony, the dark concealing more and more of the sun's rays as precious light inched through the poked holes from above, forcing him to wait patiently after each step in order to allow his eyes to adjust. The curious silence preoccupied his thoughts, distracting his attention from the task at hand, repeatedly reminding himself to hush the wandering mind and concentrate on tracking the target he engaged. Earlier, when the sun was somewhere else in the sky, he observed an adolescent elephant just a few leagues from the position he currently stood. Something startled the youngling further into the protection of the forest, escaping from his sight. Following its path through the tracks and broken leaves, he was able to pinpoint the area where his prey began to lose energy and sought rest. The smell of blood entered his nostrils. He was all too familiar with its coppery scent, tasting the resonance on his tongue. Cautious and guarded, he moved on, sensing the stench of death mixed with fresh blood. The aroma increasing and inescapable, he followed the shifting wind carrying the smell. Adjusting his speed to quiet any excessive noise from movement, the remaining light almost immediately disappeared, forcing him to pause in order to gain his bearings. A small fragmented beam of sun returned through an exposed opening from the canopy, revealing a stain at the end of his rifle. The red smear ran the entire length of his gun to where his hand rested. Fresh blood dripped from his sleeve onto his muddy boot. With his eyes attuned to the change of light, he saw that the brush he was passing through was covered with large patches of crimson sheen. After what felt like an eternity in eerie silence, the hush was broken by a frightening sound. It was unmistakably something chewing on bone and flesh. His head cried for his feet to step backward and retreat, but despite the pleading intuition, his curiosity pushed forward into a clearing where he saw the most awful thing he could ever imagine. At first, it didn't make any sense, but when the confusion lifted, he began to process and conceptualize what was laid before him. Massacred carcasses of what appeared to be hundreds of dead elephants sprawled everywhere around the clearing. The blood in the air combined with the stench of decay watered his eyes while he tried to distinguish the variation from fresh killed to half-rotten corpses. Scattered amongst the hulky remains were endless bone fragments and pieces of appendages, making it impossible to tell exactly how many there were. Small amounts of light from behind him allowed his eyes to gain fragile sight in the utter blackness. Stepping further into the clearing, he could feel brittle bones crunching under his heavy weight, soft flesh giving way to the pressure of his boot that sent a surge of shock through his body, starting at his feet seconds before the residual fear kicked in. Looking around, he saw movement on the other side of the clearing, close to the forest edge. A massive creature was leaning forward with its front legs bent, engorging on the soft tissue of what appeared to be the remains of a juvenile elephant. Though his mind instantly cried that it was impossible, he immediately knew what it was. The immense trunk protruding from its face, the huge bone tusks on the side of its bloody, gaping maw. It was unquestionable. As he stood in a frozen state of shock, he saw it lift a large tusk and crashed it down on the lifeless head of the adolescent, emitting the most horrible sound to echo through the clearing. The tusk raised, dripping with clumps of blood and brain matter stuck to the ivory. Then the monster used its trunk to pick up the shattered pieces, feeding with a sodden hunger. Watching this, he instantly knew what it was, understanding the aberration before him. Groot slang, he proclaimed, horrified. The horror instantly stopped, lifting its head looking directly at the man. He could almost make out a pinpoint spot of red in the center of its deep black eyes. Stories from shaman in various villages are shared across the continent. They tell of primordial demons as old as the world itself, too powerful even for the gods, so they were banished into a bottomless pit. Here he was in one of the behemoth's lair, staring at a creature even the gods feared. The moment of recognition was over. Once he locked in with those heinous and incessant eyes, the remnant of his sanity was drained. The scream he emitted was unanswered by the jungle, for that piece of the forest stood utterly still in fear as another victim was claimed by one of its awful secrets. I hope you enjoyed the prologue to my story. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and if you are interested in reading the further chapters, I'm building a site which will include the following. I want to thank you for letting me share an original piece, and like always, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Stay scared.